Welcome to Lucid Horizon, a talk show with the most distinguished features and figures of international politics and education about the current affairs of the world. In this episode, we have Professor Houshang Amirahmadi, Distinguished Professor of International Relations from Rutgers University, with whom we are going to continue our conversation from last week on the effect of Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, and whether it serves or disserves the national interest of the United States and Iran. Professor Amirahmadi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Professor Kangarloo. I do appreciate this invitation. I look forward to our discourse here.
Yes, if you remember last time, we left off right around the point where we were talking about the national interest of the United States and whether it's possible to see that, since we've seen that the Biden administration has been relentlessly pursuing the signing of the JCPOA, from which President Trump withdrew. And it seems that the United States is giving a lot of advantages and a lot of breaks to the Islamic Republic, and is giving a lot of concessions. And some of these concessions could be interpreted as against the national interest of the United States. And we just wanted to kind of clarify those issues. So last time you said that, you're opposed to the JCPOA, the signing of the second JCPOA. The first one was signed by Obama and the Islamic Republic, and then President Trump withdrew the United States from it, and now we're talking about re-signing and entering into the agreement, which will bring the Islamic Republic a vast array of advantages, including the removal of certain sanctions and access to international financial system and ability to sell their gas and oil. You very elaborately expanded the issue and why you are opposed to it. Could you do a 2-minute recap of what you said last time so that we can set the stage for continuing our conversation today?
Sure, my pleasure. I'm sorry. The JCPOA has, of course, two sides. Let's assume that the 5+1 just is the US, and then the other side is Iran. The two sides look at the JCPOA from a completely different perspective. From an American perspective, JCPOA is necessary to stop Iran from building bomb, and stopping Iran from building bomb is conceptualized within the framework of world peace, meaning if Iran had a nuclear bomb, the world peace will be endangered. Well, that will include the regional peace as well. Now, this is the American side. And the Iran side, on the other hand, says that I have every right within the within the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, to enrich, and I am not building bomb, and I have even forbidden, religiously speaking, building bomb. Therefore, I am not building bomb. I am looking after my right as per the NPT to enrich. And you are not allowing me that right. Instead, you are imposing sanctions on me. So let's sit and see, how do we solve this problem? Now from my perspective, both sides are not making the right argument. The way they are looking at the JCPOA, this negotiation is wrong. First, from the American side, as the history has proven, the one that is really endangering the world peace is Russia and Putin, not the Islamic Republic, which has nothing to offer. Even its bomb in the future is yet theoretical. So that, and second, American friends in the region who are supposedly more protected against Iranian bomb or the JCPOA supposedly will protect them, are opposing it. They say, no, I don't. Israel say, I don't want that protection. And Arabs want to say, Mr. Biden, thank you. If you want to protect us, we don't want that. And remember, regardless of how many bombs Iran makes, America will never be endangered because America has, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 warheads, nuclear warheads, and Iran is going to build one theoretically. So the American argument doesn't fly, really. And beyond that, there is another problem with the American side. And American go and sit in the JCPOA, negotiate a deal, take sanctions over on every country on the world stage, except on themselves. They take sanctions on Russia, on China, on Europe, in East Asia, every place else. But they don't take even one sanction on themselves. So what is that? How that serves American interests? Economically, it doesn't serve. Militarily, it doesn't serve. And politically, so. So that's the American side. There is absolutely no reason, as far as I am concerned, that America will have to go and sign this JCPOA. From Iran's side as well, I believe Iran, if the Iran does not want to build bomb, then why the Iran needs that enrichment to begin with? Iran can simply take a bulldozer and just level the whole thing and get rid of it. Because the unfortunate fact is that any country in the world that has started talking about Pakistan, India, I'm talking about Russia, I'm talking about North Korea, Israel, US, Russia, you call it. All of them, when they started enrichment, uranium enrichment, they went straight to build bomb. There is very, very, very few countries in the world that enriches for no reason but bomb. They enrich to begin with for bomb. Now, I believe in the US, if Iran is not interested in building the bomb, then it has to give up everything on the enrichment side, make a peace with the US on a broader, more comprehensive term, go back to the square one. Now, therefore, what the Iran is doing is not serving Iran's national interest either. By maintaining, keeping a small part of this enrichment and pay billions for it, it doesn't logically make sense. That enriched uranium that Iran may need could be purchased in international community at a way, way cheaper price that Iran produces for itself. So I don't see any economic reason, political or military reason for Iran to go and sit for JCPOA.
Yes, you make a very interesting point. You're saying that if there is to be an agreement between the United States and Iran because of the fact that the diplomatic relations have been severed for the last 43 years, and most of the problem, the atmosphere of distrust and suspicion that exists is because of this indirect communication and indirect negotiation that for a large part and for a long time, Russia was acting as go-between, and the Russians were kind of interjecting their own interest into this messaging task, and they kind of were muddying the waters between Iran and the United States, and they have actually been preventing the agreement from arriving. And recently, after the invasion of Ukraine, they actually went all the way out and said that, they are not going to be a part of an agreement if Russia has been subjected to any of the sanctions due to the invasion of Ukraine that affects their trade with Iran. So what you're saying is that if there is to be an agreement that can produce any tangible results, it should be a comprehensive agreement And at the end of that agreement, there should be establishment of full diplomatic relations between the two countries, and the embassies in Tehran and Washington, D.C., they have to be open. And you're saying that that will serve the best interests of both countries the best way. And that should include, as you mentioned last week, it should include the nuclear issue, it should include the missile, and it should include the proxy wars, and it should include the human rights issues in Iran. And that will really bring more stability to the region, and probably will bring the support of most of the allies that are presently alienated. We know that today Israel is hosting a summit in Negev desert between 6 Arab nations who have established diplomatic ties with Israel, and the number one topic of conversation there is Iran, and the fact that they all feel threatened at the fact that the United States is moving ahead with the signing of the JCPOA with Iran, with no regard for their allies in the region. So tell us a little bit more about this comprehensive peace between Iran and the United States, between Islamic Republic and the United States, and why do you think a comprehensive peace between Islamic Republic and the United States serves the interests of Iran and United States equally?
Well, all right, thank you. A very good question. First, let me say that the United States and Iran over the last 40-some years have lived in a state of no war, no peace. That has been the strategy of the Islamic Republic vis-a-vis the United States. And the United States of America, having no other option, unfortunately or fortunately, have lived with this no war and no peace state of affairs. Now, I have argued that that is a troubling state of affair, and that's where the Iran-US problem starts. The first thing the United States has to do vis-a-vis Iran is to take that option off the table for Iran. Unfortunately, the United States not only doesn't take that option off the table, it keeps saying all options are on the table, which is a dumb policy statement, complete dumb. All options are on the table. Mean what? What are all options? War, sanctions, peace? Why don't you just say it? What is all options? Now, I think that is wrong. They have to stop talking about all options on the table. They have to eliminate the no war, no peace option from the table and leave on the table for Iran only 2 options, war or peace. Now, I believe the United States has to give Iran first a peace option. First, that should be the priority. Say, listen, I give you first the peace option, and I pay my side of the price for that peace option. If you are prepared to pay your side of the price as well. But what is the US side of the price for this option? Is that it will say, all right, if you accept the peace, we will sit down on a comprehensive deal. I bring all the problems I have with you and put on the table, and you will bring all the problems you have, okay, on the table. Put it on the table. Of course, problems that are objective, real, and truthful, not subjective, dreaming stuff. Real, negotiable, issues like sanctions, like the enrichment, like many other issues. Everything on both sides will be put on the table. Now, and then US says, okay, let's go one by one. Let's say that let's prioritize. I prioritize first, like nuclear issue. Okay, all right. If you give up on the nuclear, this is what I will do. Iran will say, all right, if I give up the nuclear, I will need a little bit more. He says, okay, let's leave that there. We have come 50%. Let's go on the missile. If you were to give up on missiles over 2,000 kilometers of range, then I will give you this. Iran will say, no, that's not enough. I want more. I want also, for example, a defense shield, for example. And let's just go one by one, step by step. But the point is, none is resolved until all is resolved. None is resolved until all is resolved. It will take time. Yes, no problem. They have waited for 43 years. They can live with the problem for another 10 years. No problem. So it's not an issue. You should give the time a chance to resolve it. So here is but the key point here I have is that this comprehensive deal means also a grand deal economically. What that means is that both sides have to really come down to the bottom line. The bottom line for America in Iran, I think, is economic interest. As I said, U.S.'s political or military problem with the Islamic Republic is imaginary. It really doesn't exist. U.S. has as many bombs as you want. That's imaginary. The real interest the U.S. has in Iran is economic, as in the past. Now, why is so? Iran is the only country of that tremendous potential that hasn't yet emerged. If Iran emerges for the US, it would be tremendous. I think Iran is the only country left in the world that can save American economy going down the drain. Every other country that the US helped emerge has become US's competitor. US helped South Korea to emerge. South Korea is a competitor now. US helped China to emerge. China is a competitor now. US helped India emerge. India is a competitor now, and so on and so forth. America now cannot rely on every country that it has helped to emerge and used to be its ally, and they are no longer allies, they are rivals. Iran, yes, at this point, looks like an enemy, but nations have neither permanent enemy or permanent friend. They have permanent interest. The US interest in Iran permanently is economics. Iran is a country that tremendous human power, educated people, extremely cheap, inexpensive, and as much resources as you want on the ground, under the ground. So, and a market of 85 million consumers. So I don't know why the Americans are not looking at Iran carefully from that perspective. From Iran's side, there is a tremendous reason for Iran to work with America. It has still the best technology. It still has the most capital. And I believe Americans are still the most friendlier with Iran than any country. History has shown it. And we have seen in the past that Iranians and Americans can live together very, very nicely. We have over 1 million Iranians in this country, billionaires, millionaires, engineers, scientists, and you name it. That is another source for bringing them together, tying them together as two interests, two nations with common interests. They have tremendous common interests. In fact, the last word, I have always argued that the common interests of the United States and Iran far outweigh their differences. But unfortunately, in the last 40-some years, Iran and the US have only looked at that side of the glass that is empty. They have to start looking at the other side of the glass that is full. Unfortunately, Both sides are not doing it.
So assuming that a comprehensive peace and reestablishment of diplomatic relations is to the best interest of both nations, then the question emerges as such: who and what is the main barrier against such negotiation for the reestablishment of diplomatic ties? Is it the doomsday ideology of the Islamic Republic, or is it the American diplomatic core or mentality or worldview or perspective to global security and safety that is the main barrier for the reestablishment of ties? Who is really preventing the reestablishment of ties between the two nations? Is it the Ayatollah Khamenei, or is it Biden and his group and Republicans and senators and the Congress and the memory of Americans from the hostages, the bitter taste that was left in the Americans' mouth as a result of the humiliation of the hostage crisis? What is the main barrier when these two groups? I mean, you have been very active in Iran-US relations for almost 4 decades. You know, the late Madeleine Albright, who played an important role there. You know, she was my former colleague, worked at Columbia, and you know, you've been closely working with her and with other secretaries of states. So in your negotiations with the members of Congress, with the members of the elite, you know, think tank, members of the think tank, those people who have influenced the crafting of American foreign policy, what is the main barrier for the reestablishment of ties? Because after all, you just mentioned that, you know, Russia is more important, more imminent and present danger for the national security of the United States militarily, and China is a bigger danger economically. But why? And the United States has diplomatic relations with both of them. We even have diplomatic relations with Cuba and North Korea. So what is the reason? Who is the main barrier? What is the main obstacle to be overcome for the reestablishment of diplomatic relations between the two nations?
The first thing I have to say is that the problem is not ideological. It's more strategic. I tell you why it's not ideological. There is absolutely no ideological problem between the United States and Iran. They both are capitalism. In both countries, capitalism controls the economy. America and the Iranians have the same capitalist system. Second, in terms of religion, they believe in each other's religion. There is no problem there. Historically, Iran and the US have never had a fight, straight, direct fight, war. Neither US nor Iran has ever taken a territory of each other. There is no problem there like what we have with Russia or Britain. Americans have never done that. And above all, Americans have always been, except for a few times, historically speaking, on the side of Iran, as opposed to China or Russia, for example. There were two unfortunate events that got locked up and became the core problem. One was the so-called 1953 coup, which I believe that wasn't the problem. The problem was, as I've always said, the issue before that. So unfortunately, however, the nationalists, the left, religious or otherwise, they have made that a big issue, okay, historically. So that little history problem there. And the second history problem, of course, has to do with the hostage crisis, which followed from the 1979 revolution. All right. So I think there is a little bit of history issue, but history is a problem that exists in almost every country, between all countries. No territorial problem, no religious problem, no systemic problem, nothing. Now, but unfortunately, however, these incidents, the 1953 and then the 1979 revolution and the things, the hostage issues got in the way, and that led the United States of America to cut relations with Iran. That was the first big mistake. The Carter administration, disappointed with negotiations with the Islamic Republic, cut diplomatic ties with Iran. Remember, Iran did not cut diplomatic ties with the US. US cut that relation. That was a huge, big American mistake. It was really more emotional than diplomatic or logical. Why would you cut relations? They have taken hostage. Go solve a problem by war, by peace, by negotiation. What it has to do with diplomatic ties. Countries at war have diplomatic ties. Mr. Carter, why are you doing that? So that was a big first wrong step. But beyond that, unfortunately, Mr. Carter started imposing sanctions. And that sanction was the second wrong. And instead of solving the hostage question from a different perspective, including even military, they tried, of course, they tried once in a stupid way, but they went to the sanction side. That was the second mistake. Diplomacy taken off, sanctions in, and everything. Now that became a spiral conflict. US-Iran problem is a spiral conflict. In a spiral conflict in international relations, you have a situation where even the side that means well is interpreted as meaning bad. So anytime US says, okay, let's do this, Iranian will say, wait a minute, there is a plot. This guy wants me to sit there to disarm you and do something else. That's a spiral conflict. And both sides, this spiral conflict got bigger and bigger. That's number one here, the issue. Another issue, Professor Kangerloo, US-Iran relation doesn't have only one or two or three players. There are multiple players in US-Iran relations. There are countries. Like is Israel, there are Arab, there are the Russians, there are Chinese, there are Europeans. Okay? Unfortunately, none of them really want US-Iran relation improved because they all benefit from the lack of this relationship. You know, I always say Dubai is what it is because of the US-Iran relations. If US and Iran had normalized, if the Shah of Iran was there still, or his son, there wouldn't be Dubai like this. That would be Tehran, or Kish will be Dubai. Kish will be now Dubai. So they all have an interest in keeping this relation anemical. So those are the countries. Almost, I have hardly seen a country that likes it, except for countries like in Africa or in Latin America, the countries that are really real players, Israel, Arabs, Europeans, Russian, they don't like this relation improved. Second are individuals. I mean, I would say parties or groups, parties and groups. Like in the US, depending on who is in power or not, there are in the Congress and elsewhere, there are a group that is against Iran and the other for Iran, or in the Europe the same. In Iran, you also have different groups with different interests, financially and otherwise, that get into this picture, okay, and they make economic benefits from the sanctions, for example, or in this side, they make a lot of benefits from the lack of relation. For example, the military-industrial complex in the US has never been in the normalization side, while the oil sector has always been for US-Iran relations. So there is a lot of interest groups on both sides and internationally that are also players, and they spend millions, if not billions, in Washington and elsewhere to create problems as opposed to solving it between US and Iran. And finally, it is the Iranian opposition. It's unfortunate. That is the most unfortunate situation. The Iranian opposition, as you in the beginning said, particularly the ones who wanted to overthrow the regime, from the day one have said, no, this relation should not go, there should not be improved, because if the relation improves, the Islamic Republic will continue its existence. Well, both theoretically and historically, through the experience, we know for fact that that is not true. That countries that have no relationship with the United States and that they are inimical, the regimes that are inimical with the US and have no diplomatic relations, in fact, survive longer than regimes that are dictators and friendly with the United States. Mr. Pinochet is gone. The Islamic Republic is on. Many, many Latin American dictators are gone. The Shah of Iran is gone, but Castro's in Cuba are still in place. The bottom line, this opposition really is, I pardon my language, when it comes to this issue, is mindless. It's not thinking. It doesn't believe in history, it doesn't believe in experience, it doesn't believe in theory. It just believes in something that God knows where it came from. And for 43 years, they have shot themselves on the foot all the time. They continue to shoot themselves on the foot, particularly vis-a-vis the Iranian people, because this group, because it doesn't want to improve the nation, it is for sanctions. It even calls for a war between US and Iran. It calls for American war against Iran or the Israeli war. And that is why they have almost completely lost the Iranian people. The Iranian people don't like the Islamic Republic, but they don't like the opposition either. They are hanging in there. They are hanging in there. You need a group to come and save them, take them on. They don't want to deal with the Islamic Republic. They don't want to have the opposition either. So that is the group that we have to work with.
So you raised a lot of issues, and we have to unpack them one by one. So the number one issue is the establishment of diplomatic ties with between the United States and Iran, and you are putting the blame entirely on Americans for cutting ties with the Islamic Republic after the hostages were taken. But you know what we mean by diplomatic ties is following certain international norms and rules of conduct when it comes to diplomacy. You know, one of those norms is the fact that the embassy, the premises of the embassy of a country in a host country is considered the sovereign soul of the guest country and cannot be seized and overtaken. Seizing an embassy amounts to invasion of the country, and the United States actually tolerated for 444 days his embassy being taken over, and you know all the sensitive documents that were shredded were pasted back together, and 7 volumes of books of really the secrets of the nation of the United States was really published. And you know, the United States was humiliated. The international norms and international norms of diplomacy were violated by the Islamic Republic, and the United States really had no choice but cutting ties, because there was a pressure of American population, American public opinion on the government to do something. Actually, there were 2 options: either invasion or severing the diplomatic ties. And I think Carter went for the milder of the 2 options. And so, how can you have diplomatic relation with a country that doesn't observe the norms of diplomacy?
Well, thank you. First, as I have done in all my life, I have condemned this hostage taking. Not only I, every other nation, I believe, on the earth have condemned that act as an act of condemnation that deserves condemnation. What I was trying to do is I act like a politician, as someone who is trying to solve problem rather than complicate it. The fact is, regardless of whether America had an option or not, I think they had a lot of other options. I mean, it wasn't just only cut relation or invade. A lot of people have been trying. They had come to a lot of negotiations. A lot of negotiation has been going on. Okay, even before the relation was cut off. In fact, if they had not cut relations, America would be in a better position to negotiate. America, remember, the embassy was taken over, but the embassy was open. America had its people out there. It was diplomatically moving back and forth. America could have used that diplomatic ties to work with the US, with Iran. Remember, America should have been really realistic. There was a revolution. This revolution had overthrown a regime, a system in Iran that was in place for 2,500 years. It was a history-changing revolution. The United States should have seen that and then compare that to hostage taking. I'm not belittling the hostage taking. What I am saying is America was facing a phenomenon much, 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 much larger than the hostage taking. This was a country that had gone against its own history. It has gone against its own heritage. It has destroyed everything. It had gone against its own people. So America, I think, could have taken a larger, broader perspective on this and stayed the course, keep the diplomatic ties, start bringing others into the play, negotiate. Yes, it was a condemned, we condemned it, but again, condemnation is just a small part of diplomacy. That doesn't solve the problem. I think that's number one. The second thing is, I think America, not the America, Mr. Carter, I may say. Mr. Carter cut relation because he was feeling guilt. It was Mr. Carter who helped Mr. Khomeini to come to power to begin with. It was Mr. Carter who forced the Shah out of power. History is everybody's knowledge now. Mr. Carter was feeling bad. He was feeling guilt. I think the reason he cut relation, it wasn't because of the hostage. It just wanted to go back 180 degrees and say, okay, I don't feel good, so let me correct myself. And by correcting himself means cutting diplomatic ties, which was a second stupid act. The first stupid act to force the Shah out, the second stupid act to cut relations, and the third stupid act impose sanctions. All complicated. You know, American really messed up Iran. Iran messed up itself as well. But America really messed up Iran. For 43 years, Americans have not been thinking strategically about Iran. They are sensational. They are emotional. They are still, when they see Iran, they start shaking. I can't believe, I have lived in U.S.-Iran relation for almost 40 years. I know every player from the president of this country to the president of Iran, all the way down to my students in the class. I know ministers, senators, congressmen, all the executives, and you name it. I know all of them. But the question is, I think Americans really never thought strategically about Iran. They really don't have a long-term perspective of that country. America has to sit back and develop a long-term strategic perspective of Iran. It just focused, for the beginning, it was focused on the revolution and Islam, and then focused on the government. Think big about Iran. Is Iran neither all about Islam, nor about the revolution, nor about this regime? Iran is much, 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 much bigger. America never understood Iran as that big entity. It just focused narrowly on this issue, on here is the enrichment, there is a few missiles, and there is, what they are doing in Middle East, as if these are very very unexpected things, or these are something nobody has done.
Yes.
Take a long view.
Well, now we can argue that, in the light of the invasion of Ukraine, now we have new facts on the ground. If in the past, if before February 24th, the day of invasion of Ukraine by Russia, if the United States could argue that dealing with the Iran problem had some kind of a priority in the foreign policy list of to-do, now, after invasion, I think the whole world knows. Before, it was subject to, really debate whether Russia should be the priority number one in diplomatic considerations, or China or Iran. Now, I think everybody agrees that, Russia, at least for the time being, the invasion of Ukraine is really a clear and present danger, and especially the type of escalation that Mr. Putin likes to do in front of the public by reference to all kinds of options that he has in his nuclear arsenal, has created a very dangerous situation around the world. And now the United States probably is going to put Iran issue once again in the back burner and deal with a war in the center of Europe. And once again, the issue seems to me that, the sticky issue of removing the Revolutionary Guards from the list of terrorist organizations has brought the negotiations to a standstill. And it seems like the negotiations are doomed unless there is a breakthrough, unless somebody gives in, unless Mr. Khamenei decides that, the sanction, it's okay for the Revolutionary Guard IRGC to stay on the sanction list and go on with the rest of the gains from the signing of the JCPOA. So the United States is in a very tough situation. You mentioned at the beginning that the real problem should be China, the rivalry with China, the competition, the economic competition with China, the COVID, all the problems that China has created for the United States. That's what you mentioned. And then while, that by itself was not really a clear goal of the foreign policy of the United States, Russia completely stole the scene and invaded Ukraine. Now, if you were the president of the United States, if you were the Secretary of State, if you were Anthony Blinken, how do you really sort these things out? And then not to even mention the issue of the allies in the region, allies in the Middle East, the Israelis and the Emiratis and the Saudis and the Egyptians and the Moroccans and the Jordanians are very, very unhappy with the United States' relentless pressure and drive to signing of the JCPOA 2.0. Now, how, in the light of all this tumultuous international scene, can we bring the Iran issue to the top and give it a priority to bring it to an eventual resolution?
First, Professor Kangerloo, the disappointment of this countries with the United States is not just about JCPOA or the fact that Mr. Biden may return to it. It has a much deeper root. America in the Middle East and most of the world hasn't done right in foreign policy side. Okay, I mean, it has weakened its prestige and position internationally. It went to Middle East, took on Iraq, on Libya, on Afghanistan, and many other countries, Syria, and then he ran away from them. So, and then these countries see US. Saudi Arabia now, in a way, who was a strategic ally of United States for many years, forget about Israel. Now it is an ally of China. Saudi Arabia is closer to China today than it is to the United States. So the fact is, it is not because of the JCPOA that these countries are really up in the air and very concerned about. Mr. Biden, particularly this administration, just keeps, Mrs. Speaking, like the other day would say, let's get up. This guy cannot stay. And then his foreign ministry would say, no, that wasn't what he meant. Or he finishes his State of the Union address and says, go get it. I said, go get who? So this guy is really not doing it right. And the international community sees it. Indeed, the one world leader that I think is doing right these days is Macron, the president of France. He is showing to be a good leader. Young man, energetic mind, and well-educated, well-spoken, and well-learned, sort of like read. But anyway, so let's put it there. The point here is this. It's not the issue of Iran that has made these countries to go against United States. That's one problem. That's number one. The second issue is that I believe the United States should really take, again, a long view. For example, let me give you an example. Now they say the world peace is being threatened by Russia. All right. Now, if that is the case, if you believe that is true, if you are not lying, then stay with that. But that means that Iran is the secondary now. So bring Iran to the second level. And then the second level, see what it is that you can do with Iran. For example, this issue of calling the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization is a complete nonsensical policy. Why is it nonsensical? Nonsense, because it has no real impact. It doesn't prevent Revolutionary Guard to go into Syria or to Iraq or to Libya or to Lebanon to do what it is doing. Absolutely no impact. And second, in fact, if there is one force for US to work with, it's in Iran, it is not the mullahs, it's the military people. History will tell you that Americans have always been more successful with military leaders than with non-military leaders. Go to look at the history, because America always acts concentrated. They wanted to go and talk with one person, with one power. Americans, they wanted to be democracy. America loved democracy, their own democracy. Western Europeans have their own democracy. But Western Europeans, when they go to these other countries, they have no stomach for democracy. They really have no stomach for democracy because they get lost in that chaotic situation. They go to Iran, they say, we are democratic, so who I talk to? God knows who do you talk to. So Americans and Westerners always say that they are democratic, for sure. Very democratic, and I have enjoyed this democracy for 47 years in this country. Everybody enjoys it. But when America go to Iran, when he sees democracy, America starts shaking. It doesn't know what to do with it. They want one source, one power to work with. And that power either is Shah or Khamenei or the military people. In this particular case, today, the US hasn't been able to work with the mullahs. So the Shah isn't there anymore. So the only force left is the military, whether it's the Revolutionary Guard or the army or anything else. I think Americans have to think strategically. Now, resisting, not taking sort of like this label from Revolutionary Guard is nonsense. Let it go. You have a much bigger issue in front of you. Think strategically, think more long-term. This policy of Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist is a sensational, emotional, stupid policies, has no real impact on the ground.
But the way Trump actually designed this particular item of putting the IRGC on the terrorist list, it has evoked not necessarily the nuclear issue and the nuclear non-proliferation, but actually war against terrorism, which is an entirely different category. And for the United States president or any administration to remove the IRGC from that list is not just a matter of the will of the president of the United States, as you alluded into. In a democracy, there is no such thing as concentration of power. And it seems to me that Biden doesn't really have that freedom and that authority to remove IRGC from the list. And if he does, he's going to pay for it dearly in the midterm election that's coming up in 5 months. And so so that brings us to another issue, the issue of understanding the political structure of the enemy you are negotiating with, or the party you're negotiating with. It seems to me that in the diplomatic corps of the Iranian government, in the foreign ministry and in the IRGC, there is no understanding about this multiplicity of centers of power in the American political structure. The fact that, for instance, they've been asking for guarantees that the JCPOA 2.0 will not be torn up by the next president in 3 years. And we know that anybody who knows the American political structure, no president can give any guarantee on behalf of the next president. Especially if the next president is from a different political party. So it seems to me like the stickiness of a lot of issues on the JCPOA is due to the lack of education, lack of awareness and information about the political structure. And the United States, you just mentioned that they are not aware of who is really the center of power in Iran, whether it's IRGC or whether it's the supreme leader or whether it's the executive branch, which doesn't seem to have too much power. So, part of the confusion is because of lack of awareness of each party from the other party's political structure, and they're demanding unreasonable demands. They're asking for things that just cannot be delivered. And even if it is delivered, it doesn't hold any water because of the fact that, in 3 years from now, a new sheriff is in town, a new president, a new administration, and the president has the authority to not follow the promises and the agreements that the previous president signed. So far, it has been a courtesy by the future presidents to follow through with the obligations of the past presidents, but it's not a guarantee, and Iranian government has been asking for such guarantee, and it took a long time before they realized that the arguments that the Americans were making about the fact that such a thing is impossible and they just cannot give such a guarantee until it seems like they understand it. Now, the second issue is the issue of IRGC being on the terrorist list, and it's not really easy for a US president to remove the IRGC from the list because of the particular category of this particular issue. It's not directly tied to the nuclear non-proliferation that can be negotiated in the context of JCPOA. So as you see, it's not entirely because of the hostility from the revolution, or the fact that it seems like to me at least some centers of power in Iran, supreme leader and his clique of powerful people who he gathered in his establishment, in his palace, they seem to be opposed to normalization of ties. Some circles, primarily in the foreign ministry, they are for normalization and they see the benefits. The economy is in dire strait, and so there are pressures from multiple centers of power, and that's why the situation has become so complicated. So, in the light of all these opposing forces, and then we didn't even talk about the allies, the U.S. allies in the region, the Israelis and the Saudis, and then the Iranian opposition. So you can see that the situation is almost hopelessly complicated to bring any eventuality and any resolution to it in any time soon. Do you see any hope that these negotiations eventually bear results before the withdrawal of Russia from Ukraine?
Professor Kangarloo, unfortunately, I am run out of time. As I said, I have a clubhouse that already have started. They keep calling me. I think you have your final statement is a great statement to end this particular session. And then next week, we will take on your question and particularly focus on political structure and the IRGC. I think, and then bring them together in relation to the war in Ukraine.
Very well, very well. Actually, we are running out.
Let's finish this.
Yes, we are running out of time, and thank you for reminding me. And we are going to pick it up next week where we left it off today. And this is a very important issue that I don't think we would be able to bring it to a resolution anytime soon. So thank you very much, Professor Amir Ahmadi, for your participation in this. And I'll see you next week.
Bye.